Today, I'm going to talk about RWBY Ice Queendom, because at this point, I think I'm the only person that even remembers this exists. As a RWBY fan, I was honestly really looking forward to this season after the trailers, but a couple episodes in, and I kind of quickly realized that the show was going to be a lot different from what the original RWBY was, and what I think the trailers led us on to believe. Let's start with some of the good aspects of RWBY Ice Queendom, though. The animation. The animation was stellar. Honestly, I don't think anyone was having trouble believe that. The animation was incredible, and no parts of the show ever felt like it dropped in quality, with plenty of hype Sakuga action scenes all around. The art style too was also really enjoyable. I thought it sort of fit. It really made the RWBY cast really fit out and still feel cute, but during the action scenes it still kind of felt like it was in the right place. Now let's talk about the story. Now, if you haven't watched RWBY before, I'm kind of just going to briefly go over the events of the season, not really dive into any explanation of the characters and stuff, as any of the important ones during, the season will be explained. So if you haven't watched RWBY, I suggest you at least go back and watch the first 2 volumes, as that's pretty much all the explanation you'll really need. So starting from the beginning of the season, they spent about the first 3 episodes covering most of the content up through Volume 2, maybe halfway through it, of the original RWBY production. While they also introduced a new character and the whole gimmick for the season. At this point, we're introduced to Shion Zaiden, who's a hunter with a special semblance that allows her to hunt special Grimm called nightmares. These nightmares infect people with sensitive personalities and strong auras. As you'll see, the main infected for this season are Jean, Blake, and Weiss. The first example that we get to see is when Jean gets infected, and his team has to enter his dream and save him from the nightmare. Now this is where things take a turn for the season. At this point, the Jean nightmare happens. It takes maybe about half an episode. You're like, okay, that wasn't too bad. But obviously, John's known for being weak, so his nightmare also debatably weak. But after the John nightmare, they already then tease leading up to Weiss being infected with the nightmare. So that's how episode 3 ends. So obviously, they end the episode teasing the Weiss nightmare arc. And you would expect that maybe this one's going to be a little bit longer, especially considering the season's called Ice Queendom, but no. The season's truly called Ice Queendom because what happens here is once we enter the Weiss nightmare arc, it proceeds to take all of episode 4 all the way to episode 11, the second last episode of the season. Honestly, I thought the nightmare concept was pretty interesting and cool, and it was an interesting way to sort of tell and flashback and give character backstories without just shamelessly throwing a flashback in there. But the way Jean's was done, I think, was nice. It took maybe half an episode. They got in, they got out. Weiss, with all of her trauma dumping that she's got to do, she took the whole season. My only problem with Weiss's nightmare arc is that as much as it's not even that it really takes the 9 episodes. By episode 6, I kind of got that feeling. But at the same time, it just felt like all the episodes before their final go into the nightmare, before it got to the point where Weiss's life was actually in danger. As much as they were making progress, it also kind of felt like nothing was being accomplished. RWBY enters Weiss's nightmare at least 3 times and would fail and then just leave and try again and maybe bring one more person in this time, until the point where it was RWBY, Blake, Yang, and John all entering Weiss's nightmare. And even the way that Weiss's nightmare was actually handled and dealt with, I'll be honest, I completely forget how, the chess piece things work in the nightmare. But John's only had the one. And they got his, defeated the nightmare, and it was fine. Weiss, I feel like they picked up 6 of those things throughout her entire nightmare. And in the end, it didn't matter until RWBY just showed up to fight the actual final boss nightmare and take that chess piece. So I don't really know exactly what the point. I'm sure it maybe weakened the nightmare, made things easier. But that's how long this took. And how sort of zoned out I got from the previous attempts in the nightmare is that I honestly just forgot things by the next week. But I didn't feel they were enough of a necessity to go back and remember what they were about. So at least the interesting way that they actually do defeat the final nightmare, RWBY faces off with the main big bad nightmare per se, and honestly starts losing, but then she awakens to the silver eyes, which honestly, interesting way to introduce them, even though that doesn't happen till volume 3 in the original RWBY. But I think it was an okay way to sort of try to tie it in and establish the silver eyes in case they might actually do a season 2 going forward or whatever. But then the way they actually defeat Weiss, as they've not been able to defeat her the whole time, is they now infect Blake with the nightmare inside the nightmare. So once RWBY finally defeats Weiss and Weiss gets broken from the nightmare spell, they're now still in Weiss's nightmare, but they have to defeat Nightmare Blake. Yeah, cool. I don't know. Nightmare Blake's outfit was really cool. At least I'll give it that. But yeah, and honestly, you know what? Too, the final fight scene was incredible. The animation was ridiculous, over the top, and it was fantastic. So kind of made me forget about all the nonsense that was going on in the meantime. So after all of the shenanigans, and they finally actually defeat all the nightmares, and they pull out, we get to the last episode. And the season wraps up with the food fight scene being adapted, which I think a lot of fans were happy to see at least. Because I'll be honest, after taking up that whole season, I didn't really know what they were going to do to tie up in episode 12. But so they adapted the food fight scene, and it was a lot of fun. And honestly, they gave that scene way too much budget. Like, for people just boxing with turkeys and sword fighting with baguettes and swordfish, they did not need to give this much animation quality to it. That's all I'll say. And the real wrap-up of the season then ends with Shion saying that there's no more nightmares in the region, and then she proceeds to leave and that her job is done. Now, I'm very doubtful about that. Now, I don't know how big this region she says there are, but the fact that alone she came to this school, and in 1 week there were at least 2 nightmares, you know, as sensitive people with strong auras, is kind of what this school is a hub for. I'm a little concerned that there might be more nightmares to come back, and then there's just going to be nothing to do about them. I don't know, but we'll see if there's ever a season 2, I guess. Overall, I still enjoyed watching RWBY Ice Queendom, but as a RWBY fan and watching the trailers, if you go back, the first trailer completely only shows Volume 1 content in it, which is basically just the first episode content. And the second trailer is pretty much 80% original RWBY content, with only 20% introducing and showing off Shion without actually doing anything. But obviously, when we got the real show, we only had 3 episodes of real original RWBY content at best. I think RWBY fans were expecting a more traditional adaptation of the original show with some new elements thrown in, but then obviously what we got was basically a completely new, derailed RWBY anime. Let me know what you felt about RWBY Ice Queendom in the comments, and if you liked the video, make sure to leave a like. I plan on making more reviews and videos covering anime in the future. See you in the next video.